Hi everyone, it's Plastic EP coming in from Melbourne, Australia. It gives me great pleasure to talk to Glyn Johnswright, coming in from the UK, one of the greatest engineers, producers of music out there in the world. He was inducted in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 2012. How are you today, Glyn?
I'm really well, thank you.
I want to start off at Get Back in 1969, and then I want to talk about the Get Back with Peter Jackson. Now, Michael Lindsay Hogg filmed everything, and he had the foresight, like a Cecil B. DeMille, to film everything, get everything down on sound. But you being there in the moment, after watching the Peter Jackson film that no one has seen, that footage of 60 hours broken down to 8 hours, I've seen it. I'm so fascinated. And I've got to say, one of the people that is a standout is yourself. And I'll tell you why. You're talking to the Beatles, they're creating songs, you're giving them helpful advice, and it's like you're in the moment.
So the invitation to work with the Beatles was wonderful. I mean, it came as a huge surprise, I have to say. And having worked with the Stones all those years, I felt a bit like I was a traitor. I was going into the enemy camp. Well, I turned up at Twickenham the first day. But it was a fantastic invitation, and I enjoyed every minute. I was retained as the engineer, but as it turned out, I ended up doing a bit more than that. So it was great. The one thing about Peter's film, which I have to say I agree with you, is quite extraordinary, and a lot of other people seem to think the same. The only thing that doesn't quite tally with my memory, and I understand why, is we actually rehearsed the material a lot more than is shown in the film. And quite obviously, Peter didn't include us rehearsing the material to the same extent as the conversations and the chit-chat and all the rest of it, because otherwise everyone would have got tired of seeing the same song being played over and over and over and over and over again. So in fact, we did work quite hard. I mean, it didn't look like it, but we did.
Now, doing Itchy Park in 1967 and using the phaser, you don't understand what a great hit, big hit that was worldwide, but especially here in Australia. That was like fantastic. I mean, and you must have a love of Australians as well, and Australia.
Well, funnily enough, I do. I've been a couple of times and I do love it. I love Australia, and I get on really well with Australians. In fact, I think the only Australian act I ever worked with was Midnight Oil, which I had a great time with. They came to my place in Sussex in England and stayed there, and we made an album. We're fantastic, wonderful band.
Now I saw an interview where someone rang you up and you thought it was Mick Jagger, but it was actually Paul McCartney. Do you remember that? And you told him to F off, is that right?
Well, pretty much, yes.
Tell me that story.
Well, I'm sitting at home on a very rare night off. Phone rings, pick it up, and there's a Liverpudlian accent asking for me, and I thought it was Mick taking the mick. I just thought he was taking the piss. So I said, "Oh, what do you want? You know, I'm watching the telly or whatever." And there was silence at the other end, and then it said, "Well, this is Paul McCartney," and I thought, "Oh, blimey." I wanted to know how he got my number. Anyway, it was a bit awkward, but he understood.
Now, I want to say, working with the Stones and working with the Beatles, I can understand, quite frankly, these bands have got egos where if you work for them, they want you to work for them solely. I get that impression. Like, as you said, if you work with the Stones and then you work with the Beatles, it's like you're in the middle. How did you feel? This is what I want to know.
Well, I don't know what you're saying is actually true. I don't think the Stones gave a monkey that I went with the Beatles, to be honest with you. But there was always an element of very healthy competition between the Beatles and the Stones in the 60s. And frankly, what the Beatles were doing was so entirely different from the Stones. It's chalk and cheese. I personally wouldn't say one was better than the other. Obviously, the Beatles had a larger influence over popular music, I would say, than the Stones did. But the Stones did make some amazing records in the 60s. And I think they were, in their own way, were every bit as good as the Beatles. So that's that. So, in fact, I'd met John and Paul I can't remember exactly when, a little while before the Let It Be sessions, because they came and sang on a vocal backing on a Stones track. So that just shows you the relationship they had. They were quite happy to come and sing on something that Mick had asked them to do.
I like that story about you did Let It Be, you did Get Back. They're yours. You produced them and you asked them, can I be a producer? Can I get a producer credit? I don't want money. I want a producer credit. I love that. You know, to me, that is you. That is a genuine person that cares so much about his work and wants to get a bit of recognition, which you're entitled to get.
Yes, I didn't feel it was at all right to ask for a royalty, because frankly, Mickey Mouse could have been in there making a record with them. They could record the phone book and it would sell a huge amount of copies. So I couldn't possibly take any credit for that. But it would have helped me tremendously in my career, obviously, if I'd have put producer credit on the original album.
Now, I want to say with Michael Lindsay Hogg's work, right, he's groundbreaking for that time. I'm saying, had that concert happened in North Apple, that could have been something really fantastic.
Yeah, it could, but it was just impractical, and the band didn't want to do it. That was the end of it. So, you know, Michael was famous prior to this because he did a TV show called Red Steady Go, which was a weekly music program, huge in England. Everybody and their mother watched it every Friday. And Michael was the director of that show, so he was very well versed in what was going on in popular music, and was perfect for this. I mean, absolutely perfect for it. It's a shame he didn't get to make the TV show that he wanted, but there we are. He didn't. While we were in Savile Row, there was still some dilemma. This is before the Roof concert idea came out. There was still some dilemma as to what would happen with the album, as there wasn't going to be a show. And so I had the idea, as I'd been in the room watching them work for a couple of weeks, as a fly on the wall as much as anything. You have to remember, at that moment in time, the Beatles were on a pedestal 9 miles high in the world. They couldn't go anywhere in the world without being recognised, etc., etc. And what they'd contributed to popular music was so massive. But as individuals, no one had seen them working the way I was watching. And I thought, well, why not make the album a fly on the wall, rather like the Basement Tapes, Bob Dylan's Basement Tapes, that sort of idea. So on the way home one evening, I went to Olympic Studios and I mixed, I can't remember how many songs, 3 or 4 songs together, tied them together with a bit of chat and a full start and a bit of banter between them and the rest of it. Took it to Apple the following day, played it to them as an idea for what the album could be, and it got completely thrown out the window. I figured it would, but at least I gave it a go. So that was then. Then months later, after we'd finished, and they'd already started, they might have even finished Abbey Road, I can't remember. I get a call and asked to meet John and Paul at Abbey Road, and they then give me the master to say, okay, remember that idea you had? Well, we think that's the way to go, so why don't you go away and do it? So I went off on my own. They didn't want to come for some reason. They weren't interested, I suppose.
Isn't it great though, now with the Let It Be limited edition box set, they've got your version of the album. How fantastic is that? Yeah,
it's the first time it's seen daylight. It was bootlegged in 1969, in fact, but yeah, it's finally 50 years later seen the light of day. It's a bit late, really, but better late than never, I guess.
Yeah, but the great thing, it's happened, and you're getting credit for it. When I mean that, new fans, Beatle fans, are getting aware of it. So for them, it's something new.
Yeah.
As we move on now, in 2022, and now it's still the Beatles are the biggest thing in the world. And as I said, when you look back on your fantastic career, you must have so many great stories, and I know they're all in your book. Sound Man, right? The live recording hits with all these artists, the Rolling Stones, the Who, you name it, Led Zeppelin doing their first album. I mean, you must have stories that I think you may not have even shared with the world. Is there any story you can tell us to your fans on this show?
No, it's all in the book. I mean, what I can remember, listen, I'm ever so old, you know, I can't remember anything. No, it's all in the book. That book took quite a long time to write. It might not read like that, but I can assure you it did. No, there aren't any others. I mean, there probably are, but not off the top of my head. Not really, no. Sorry.
Okay, isn't it fantastic that you recorded the 2 songs, Honky Tonk Woman, and You Can't Always Get What You Want, and you thought that You Always Can't Get What You Want was a great A-side, and they called in Eric Clapton, and he came in.
And he said, you're wrong, Honky Tonk Woman's the A-side, which I didn't agree with, but of course, he was absolutely correct. They were both hits, so, you know, we were both right, really.
Unbelievable. Now, what was it like with Led Zeppelin co-producing the first album with Jimmy Page? How great was that?
It was an extraordinary experience. I'd known Jimmy since I was a kid. We grew up in the same town. And I helped get him his very first sessions as a session guitar player. John Paul Jones, the bass player, was a session bass player, and I've worked with him almost every day. He was on a session with somebody. So I knew John really well, and I knew Jimmy really well. So I got a call from Jimmy saying that he'd put a band together and he wanted to make an album. I had no idea who the other 2 people were, but I knew it was going to be pretty good if Jimmy and John Paul were involved. So I agreed to do it. Turned up for the first session, and the 4 of them set up and started playing. And I couldn't believe what I was listening to. It was absolutely extraordinary. Hair parting, quite amazing. And I knew both Jimmy and John really well. So the combination of what they'd become with the other 2 members of the band was pretty extraordinary, I think.
When you mixed My Generation for the Who, you knew that was a hit song, didn't you?
Yes, of course, yeah. It's obviously incredibly exciting when you hear a band perform something like My Generation for the first time. Yeah, it was quite obviously going to be a massive hit. Won't Get Fooled Again, I had exactly the same feeling with. All Day and All of the Night with the Kinks, I had exactly the same feeling with. Probably there are a few others, but certainly it's astonishing. And the reality of all that is, of course, you may think it's going to be a hit, but you never really know, because once whatever you do as a unit leaves the studio and gets in the hands of a record label, you've got no idea how it's going to be treated, or whether the record company are going to do a good job, or whether anyone's going to pay any attention. And there have been numerous occasions over the last 50 years where, you know, I've been very busy. I go from one album to the next, to the next, to the next, sort of almost one day with a day's break or whatever to get where I have to be to do it. And then all of a sudden, somebody tells you that something you did 3 or 4 months ago or 6 months ago has been released as a single and is number 3 in the charts or something. And I've already moved on. I've probably done 3 other albums in that period of time. So it's not something you linger on, you know, you move on.
What was it like working or talking with George Martin as a producer? How did you find him?
George Martin was a complete gentleman. In fact, because the band had decided that they were going to do a live concert, this, as the Let It Be project was, they felt that they didn't require George's services as a producer. So when I turned up the first day, George actually wasn't there. I mean, George did come most days. He appeared for 10 minutes or half an hour or whatever, just to keep a beady eye on things, as is right. But he didn't produce Let It Be at all, really. The band did, and I did to a much smaller extent. But he was a complete gentleman about the whole thing. He took me out to lunch and he said, "You're not to worry about this. It's perfectly all right." It's because I felt quite uncomfortable. I mean, as far as I was concerned, I was going to be the engineer. But he was completely delightful, put me at ease about the whole thing. And we became friends and remained friends until he died. Yeah.
That's great. Now, I've got to bring you back to the Let It Be project. Now, Ringo Starr went on to do the Magic Christian. Did you think that Let It Be project would have continued after the filming of Magic Christian? Or did you think it had stopped before the Magic Christian?
Oh, no, we'd finished.
You'd finished.
The last night in Savile Row was it. Yeah. Yeah. absolutely. And then there was a break, and then we went in and started Abbey Road.
When did you sort of get the inkling that the Beatles were over? I'm just curious, from your part, that there'd be no more Beatles.
Well, I don't know. Obviously, the day George decided he didn't want to be in the band anymore, Twickenham was a bit of a jolt. Once he came back, I didn't figure it was over at all. And certainly while we worked on Abbey Road, they were all getting on great. There was no hint of any kind of problem at all. So I didn't finish Abbey Road. I started it, but I didn't finish. George Martin came back in and finished it. Did the most brilliant job, without any question, with Jeff Emmerich, the engineer. As far as I was concerned, everything in the garden was lovely. I could see that there was definitely a rift between Paul and the others because of Alan Klein being involved. He didn't really want Alan. He didn't agree with the idea of Alan Klein, and John was very heavy on the idea. John wanted him, and so I think that was caused the final split of the band more than anything else, really.
I want to ask you a little bit about Eric Clapton, doing the Slowhand album. I mean, what a fantastic, great album that is. You've done these monumental albums.
Yeah, I'm a really lucky boy, I can tell you.
No,
most of them I've just been lucky to be in the room, I can tell you. Slowhand was particularly wonderful for numerous reasons. First of all, Eric, which is an essential thing, Eric was in a particularly good frame of mind. He and that band, who were wonderful, I have to say, Jamie Oldecker on drums, Carl Radel bass. They'd been on the road for quite a while, so they were playing. They were locked in. You know, they were well rehearsed, not as far as that material was concerned, but they were used to playing with each other. So I just hit a lucky streak there, I think. You know, they were great to work with. I mean, it was like falling off a log. The very first day we go in, we started at 2:30 in the afternoon. We cut Wonderful Tonight, and we'd finished it by 5:30. In 3 hours, it was done, finished. That was the way that album went, really. It was great fun, really great fun.
Fantastic. Now, I've got to ask you, because being a man in the music business all your life, when you're at home relaxing, what album do you get and you listen to that you really enjoy?
I've made a lot of records, and so sometimes I will listen to odd tracks from records I made years ago that I haven't heard for a long time. Oh, there's all kinds. I mean, I listen to Diana Krall, I listen to a very broad spectrum of music, to be honest with you. I can't think of anything offhand now, but I keep, my son sends me stuff every now and then, my daughter aims stuff at me every now and then. Yeah, interesting. I love Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers. I listen to a lot of their stuff. There's loads of stuff, loads of Dylan I like listening to. I always wanted to make a studio album with Dylan, but never got to, which is my big regret, really. I did make a live album with him, which was pretty good, but I've never made a studio album with him. Anyway, go on. Yeah.
Now with The Who, I just want to ask you about Entwistle. I want to ask you his sound and what he brought towards the band. How great did you think that was?
The thing about The Who is that all three of them were completely original in their style of playing. And as in so many bands or rhythm sections, for different reasons than The Who, perhaps, but the combination of 3 or 4 people in the rhythm section, in some cases, quite subtly makes the difference and is the stamp of what that act is. In the case of The Who, you can magnify that by 100 times. Keith Moon is like no drummer I've ever worked with. John Entwistle, not only his style of playing, but the sound he got was like no other bass player. And of course, Townsend, we needn't go on about Townsend, we all know about Townsend, he's completely brilliant. So the band without John Entwistle or with an ordinary bass player would not have been anything close to it would not have had the achievement that the band did, without any question. So the guy was a remarkable musician. extremely accomplished. He could play any brass instrument, for example. Not that that's got anything to do with his bass playing, but it just shows you how his depth of musical knowledge.
I've spoken to a lot of Beatle fans who have watched now the Get Back special, and a lot of people have asked, the coat that you're wearing in the Get Back Peter Jackson special, seriously, they want to know, did you get that from the Apple Boutique or were you shopped to get that jacket?
I don't remember where I bought it. In fact, I don't remember any of what I got, any of the clothes I'm wearing in
I got to say, you're a standout. Look, in all seriousness.
It's embarrassing beyond belief. I look like a complete twat. I look like a bloody clown. Anyway, I obviously thought I was pretty cool at the time.
No, I'm not joking. You're the coolest. I've seen that 2 times, part 1, part 2, and 3, and you're just in the moment. Dressed to the T of the scene. That's the scene. Man, you're in the scene. I'm being honest with you.
That was the influence of being with the Rolling Stones for the previous 8 years or whatever. You know.
When we look back now on your career, I'm just saying, were you more closer to John or Paul, or just close with everybody?
I had a close relationship with Paul because it was Paul that employed me. It was Paul that called me and booked me to do the sessions. The others accepted me as I walked in the door and made me very comfortable without any question. I ended up having a very close relationship with George. I went on after those sessions and George produced an album with Billy Preston a few weeks after those sessions, which I did. So George and I went on and did work after that. And then when Paul put Wings together, I started Red Rose Speedway with him. So they were the two that I ended up with a strong relationship with. And Ringo and I, well, we all got on great. I mean, they were very kind to me.
Do you know what's really great that comes across in the Get Back special to me? That you are part of that elite group of that Beatles circle, because you're like, it comes across like you're one of them. When you talk to them, they listen, they respond to what you say, and you're just like in the moment with them. That comes across crystal clear.
Well, that's what the role I was required to fulfill required. So there's nothing unusual about that. If it had been anyone else, the same thing would have applied, I'm sure. It wasn't peculiar to me.
Well, what I'm trying to say is you're on the same vibe with them. You know, similar age, same vibe comes across.
Okay.
Would you agree with that or not?
Similar age, yes. I guess the same vibe. I mean, that's part of the role of what I was there to provide, is that if you're not accepted by the people you're working with, or you don't accept them, then you shouldn't be there. Simple as that.
Now, Glyn, I've got to ask you, in your career, is there anybody you really wanted to record that you couldn't record as an artist? Any artist that you really wanted but just couldn't record them?
I just touched on Bob Dylan. I'd love to have made a studio album with Bob Dylan. Other than that, I'm pretty happy, I think. Yeah.
Any female artists of the 60s you would have loved to have recorded?
No, I did record Dusty Springfield. She was pretty cool in the 60s. Most of the people that I wanted to, I did. Joan Armstrong is still my favorite female artist. Quite an astounding talent. No, I'm very happy with my lot.
Now, this is a long shot question, so if it works, it works, okay? Can I ask you, did you ever keep a diary or a journal of like your daily events during the 60s?
I kept a work diary throughout the 60s and the 70s, or the beginning of the 70s. That was purely the hours, because I was charging as an engineer. I was charging an hourly rate as an engineer in the 60s anyway. And also when I started producing, I kept a diary just to where I was and how many days I was booked for, and travel plans and that sort of nonsense. Yes, so the answer is yes. It's very deep. In fact, I'd never have been able to write the book if I hadn't had the diaries. I'd been dead in the water because I can't remember most of it. I never stopped work. I worked ridiculously long hours every day. But I enjoyed it, otherwise I wouldn't have done it.
Now, as we move into the future, and I've got to say, and you look back on your career, okay, how do you sum it up going down this golden road? You worked very hard to get there. That's what comes across to me. You just really worked at your craft and your career.
Okay, I certainly did work very hard, but it wasn't in order to achieve the end result that I've come to necessarily. It was, I loved what I was doing. So it wasn't hard at all. It was mostly incredibly enjoyable. Some, obviously not every bit, some of it was pretty awful, but I'm a really lucky man. I've got to do a job that I absolutely love, and I'm still doing it now. And there aren't many people that can say that. You know, I don't regret anything. I mean, I might have regretted the odd comment I made, but other than that, I've had a blast. I've had an absolute blast, and I still intend to carry on having a blast. You know, can't get enough.
Now, I just want to say, when the Beatles were in the studio, did they mainly drink tea?
Now, why would I remember what they drank? In the film, it looks like they drink a lot of tea. They probably did. But also there's a bit of wine going around. I don't know. I wasn't paying attention to what they were drinking.
No, that's all right. All I want to know is they looked after you, didn't they, Glyn?
Big time, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
You know, that's magic right then. Being Australian, you know, we're very hospitable, right? But being there with the Beatles, I mean, it must have been one big, you know, it must have been a big event. It may not have been a big event to you at the time because you were living it and you were doing it. But for all the generations of Beatle fans to come, to see the Let It Be documentary, to see the original footage of the Let It Be film, to see the rooftop concert, to see everything you've done and the mass amount of work and your catalogue of what you've done, to me, it's mind-blowing.
Well, thank you very much. It's, as I say, I've had a really good time. I've got to work with some amazing artists over the years. And obviously, you say it might not have meant much to me to work with the Beatles. Of course it did. It meant a huge amount, particularly in 1969. It was a privilege to work with them. I don't know what else to say, really. Yeah.
You know what, Glyn? I just want to thank you so much for this interview. To me, it's a riveting interview. It's you. I really appreciate it more than you think, because I want to tell you something. I'm a fan of your work, of you, and what you've achieved and what you've done. And I want to tell you something. You know, your body of work is going to live forever. How great is that, knowing that?
Oh, thank you. That's great. You're right. Yeah, because one doesn't tend to think of that. But yeah, that's very cool. I mean, the fact that something I did 50 years ago is making as much noise as it is now is pretty cool. Anyway, thank you for the invitation. It was very nice to talk to you.